Welcome back to the Meaningful Success Podcast. My name is Josiah Clark, and this is the big man himself.
Wade. I don't know what to do with that.
I don't know why. It seems to catch you off guard every single time. And, that's something I've been doing every episode, and you always seem taken aback by it.
Well, that's true. So, son, how was your week?
My week has been kind of a mixed bag. It's been pretty good overall, but just writing is still ongoing and still pressing on with that. I've been hanging out with some friends, which has been nice. And yeah, I mean, what about you?
Overall, it's been a good week. Although today is Monday, so it's kind of short.
Well, sure, but it's like over the last week, really.
Yeah, over the last week. I got a little bit of rest over the weekend, which was helpful. Kind of set aside time not to do things for change, and so that actually helped recharge the batteries a bit, and kind of forced inside a little bit because the weather was kind of rainy and stuff and cold, and so I wasn't able to really go out there and run, but that kind of forced me to rest. So that was not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah.
So Josiah, what do we want to talk about this week?
Well, this podcast is about our own success journeys. Right. And it's about, as well as just talking about the topic of success and all that in general. And part of that journey is dealing with the slumps and the discouragements and the losses of motivation or just being tired.
Right.
Those sorts of things.
And is that something you're dealing with right now?
It is. It's something I'm dealing with right now. We were talking previously. It sounded like you're dealing with some similar stuff.
Yeah, I've got a few things that it's been kind of occupying my thoughts and energies.
Yeah. So not just to wallow, but
oh, come on, let's wallow.
Yeah, I mean, just sharing. Okay, here's the true place of here's where we are in our journey right this second. We're both dealing with a little bit of discouragement, right? So for you, what is some of that discouragement coming from?
I don't even know if right now I would classify where I am as discouragement as tired.
Yeah.
I am a little discouraged on there's always metrics that we want to look at on different things that you're doing. And, whether it be the kind of the relaunch of one of my books or other things like that, you look and you say, hey, are people seeing it? Are people looking, engaging, those types of things? And so there is a degree of, I kind of wish it was at a different place than it is, discouragement. But, partly I think what I'm dealing with is a cumulative effort of, quite frankly, a few years of gas pedal to the floor on a lot of things.
Yeah.
At a certain point, it just like, you have to ease up on the gas some. And I look ahead at some of the things that I know I need to accomplish, even in the short term. And it can be a little bit exhausting even looking at that, just the things that need to be done. So I think I'm kind of a little bit in a sluggish slump because I've been going so fast, so long.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. And that's something I can definitely relate to as well. When you're talking about the metrics, like, can you kind of talk about that a little more? Like,
so we built this initial course and we launched it. And we actually got some help from an advertisement agency because I don't know anything about advertising on LinkedIn or those types of things.
Yeah.
We've had some success from the standpoint of we had a decent click-through rate. Meaning people who saw the ad actually clicked through and said, hey, let me take a look at this.
Yeah.
But out of, 100, 200 people looking at it, not a single purchase. Yeah. And that can be discouraging, because you see all these, every time you turn on YouTube or something else, like, oh, gee, I learned how to blow my nose in a Kleenex and I did a course and I wrote this course in 3 hours and then, and I made $14,000 on how to blow your nose with a Kleenex. I'm exaggerating, but really not so much.
Yeah.
And so, this was a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so it is discouraging to not have any return at that point. And granted, I recognize this is I'm literally at ground zero in terms of learning this. I mean, I may have a lot of knowledge of sales in the professional services space. That's direct sales, that's service sales, that's B2B environment. Product sales to consumers is an entirely different animal.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit discouraging. It's a little bit overwhelming not to have any of the results that I was hoping for at that time, because some of those results obviously help pay the bills for other things that you want to invest in. And so that's a little bit discouraging.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that the ads attracted the attention to get people to click through to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know whether what I need to do differently on that end. So that can be discouraging.
I think part of the discouragement of that is, this is something that we worked together on, that we put probably hundreds of hours of work into.
Sure.
So for it to not have gotten any sales, it can feel like, what was the point of all that effort a little bit?
It can, but at the same time, I also know that this course is a piece of a puzzle.
Yeah.
And so really, if someone wants to understand how to sell professionally in a B2B environment, there's several skills they have to get. And so really, if they were going to say, hey, I need to understand all this, they're going to want all 5 pieces of the puzzle. And right now I've got 1 piece.
Yeah.
So I think that there is an element where I've kind of taken a step back, and I've actually pulled that course off sale for right now, because I determined that I think that the better course of action is waiting to develop the other 4 pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. And then have it be one full package.
One full package that says, okay, if this is your need, here is what you need to know in each area that you need to develop those skills. And I think that's actually a much more holistic approach that's going to help meet people's needs where they are.
I think that's a good example of taking disappointment and fueling it in a constructive way, because it's easy to have the feeling of like, oh, what's the point of even trying? Because this isn't working and that's not working.
It is easy. It is easy to do that, but you have to be more objective.
Right. And that's hard. That's very hard to do when essentially you're selling yourself in a way. You're selling something that you believe in, that you've put a lot of effort into. And that's the same thing with stuff I'm dealing with my writing. Is I really believe in what I'm writing, and I feel like I'm doing
incredible.
I feel like I'm doing a really good job and everything, but I'm just really not seeing anybody read it. And it's not a matter of like people are reading it and they don't like it. It's like it's just not getting clicks in the first place for people to even check it out.
Well, and that's just an example, because in each of these areas, even the solution that will fit for the courses that I wrote is not the same solution that's going to work for your books, because it's a totally different environment. It's people looking for something to entertain themselves, something to engage them, to read, those types of things. It's just a different spot, and it's some different techniques. Now, I'm not saying that aren't things that you can use in common, but it's a discovery. It's not like finding one formula answers the other.
Yeah, no, of course. But I guess what I'm getting at is, these are both you're selling your expertise in a way,
right, with
the course. And that's something that you've built up over a long time. That's really personal to you, right? So it's a similar thing with the writing, where there's this very personal element to it. And I think the temptation that can come up with that discouragement is to internalize, for lack of a better word, the failure of the product that you're trying to put out to make waves yet, to, get people reading or get people buying yet. It can be really easy to internalize that as reflecting on your own value in a way.
It can, but then you realize, if you take a step back and you think about it, you say, okay, have people, and let's take my course for example.
Yeah.
Have people rejected the course? Well, not really, because they haven't taken it. So the people, until people actually get engaged and take the course and give feedback. Hey, this really helped me in these ways. These are some things that could really help me be better at that. Yeah. That's the next stage, because even when we get sales, we're going to get some positive feedback and we're going to get some negative feedback, and that's something we need to learn from. But it's not it's not a judgment of the quality of the course. It's literally people haven't taken it yet, so we haven't even got that feedback. And with the case of your book, it's a discovery process. It's people finding you.
Yeah.
And and actually, maybe that's reverse. How do you find them so that you can place yourself where they will discover you?
Yeah, and there's a piece of it too where these things unveil our inadequacies.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in an insecure way. I just mean everyone has inadequacies. Everyone has areas that they're weak. And for me, marketing is not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I am not an advertiser like at all. And so, it feels like, because we were approaching both of these, we were approaching the course together,
Mm-hmm.
And so looking at this from that perspective of I'm not an advertising person. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that effectively. And I can say that without shame because it's a skill I just don't have.
Right.
But it can make it feel more hopeless when it feels like the very thing you need is the thing that you do not have the skill for.
Well, it's one of those things. It's, for example, for those listening, you'll find this out probably over the course of these podcasts. I'm an effective user of technology, meaning give me an Excel program, give me a Word program, give me something that is, Microsoft or whatever product or Apple product. I can use it and not have a problem. If there's any degree of technical troubleshooting involved, if it gets into behind the scenes settings, if it gets into, well, why doesn't this printer print?
Yeah.
I fall short. And particularly when you start looking at some of the things that we've looked at as we set up the business and different things, there's all kinds of different software that support different aspects of the business that we do. And you got to get them working together and the websites working together and these things integrated and all that kind of stuff. And I hate doing that because, and I recognize that the reason I hate doing that is that I feel completely inadequate, completely lost, and I don't have the skill set to interpret what I even need.
Yeah.
And so the challenge becomes, it's a frustration because it's a feeling of helplessness.
Yeah.
And that feeling of helplessness permeates and rather than it just being, oh shoot, it gets really frustrating in those situations.
Yeah.
And so I think that even in the things that we're talking about, that's where these things come into play. What about you? I mean, we talked about the course and we talked about your writing and trying to get people to find it. What other things, you said you've been discouraged, what other things related to this kind of fall into this picture right now?
Well, it's part discouragement, part exhaustion, it's kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So there's a piece of it that is, I've had good momentum with writing and it's going well, but then there's days like today that I'm just exhausted, and I'll be able to work on stuff a little bit, but I just do not have the capacity to dive in the way that I want to.
Yeah.
And there's this internal battle that happens where it's like, okay, is it wrong for me to take today as, as a low energy, whatever day and give myself that rest without the pressure of feeling like I have to make up for it or that I have to perform as much as I can under the circumstance,
Or have to do 150% tomorrow.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I think that that's actually a good segue because I think that one of the things that we wanted to do is just talk a little bit about how do we combat these discouragement? How do we combat the exhaustion in a constructive way? And there are a few things that come to my mind, and I'm sure there's things that you have as well. I mean, a few things that I would say is number one, acknowledge that there's going to be days that you're discouraged, weeks you're discouraged. In fact, you may have months that you're discouraged.
Yeah.
And acknowledging that it's okay and it's part of the process is fine. It's not if you're not discouraged, then the question is, are you really challenging yourself? Because with big tasks and with big goals comes frustrations and comes challenges, and that's just part of the game. But as far as constructively, I think that there's a few things for me that come to mind. Number one, you need to surround yourself. You don't need to go alone at things. So you have to have that support system around you that's there to either kick you in the pants or to encourage you when you're down. I mean, it can be a little bit of both. And you're part of that network for me. My wife and my other son are part of that network for me. Just to keep that action going and to help speak objectively because when you're discouraged, your view of things can be distorted.
Yeah.
So one is surrounding yourself and allowing people to speak objectively. I think another thing is allowing yourself to step away from time to time.
Yeah.
And without the feeling that, okay, then tomorrow I have to do 150%.
Well, and I also want to clarify on that it is stepping away without the thought that it's a failure so for example, right? Like, this weekend I didn't do any writing.
Right.
And that's not normal. Normally I would do at least one day on the weekend where I'm focused on that. Mm-hmm. But circumstances just didn't let that happen. Like it just sort of, there wasn't an intentionality behind I am stepping away for a few days, right? That didn't happen. What happened was life. Right. And I think there is something important about when it is your choice versus when stuff just happens.
Yeah, but you have to allow space for both because both will happen.
They both will happen. Well, okay, actually, the life stuff is inevitable, right?
Yes.
But it is not inevitable. It's not a both will happen that you will make that intentional choice to step away.
No, that's true. That's true.
That part has to be intentional and has to be. And so, today that's sort of been what I've been doing. And the feeling of that is much different than this weekend when I just there was just too much happening. Correct. And I couldn't make it happen.
Correct.
Because there is not since I've basically said to myself, like I've worked on as much as I can and that's all the capacity I have for today. So I am stopping. So I am making this choice that I am now done. I am releasing myself. That is very different.
That's true. That's true.
And I think it's important to actually do that, to have that be a thing that you do, even when you have, like right now I'm doing NaNoWriMo. I was already going to be a little bit off as far as the dates for that go. But, I'm halfway through November and I'm 20% through the word count almost. Right. So it's like those don't line up. Those are not numbers that line up for me to meet that goal. And so there is a place of, okay, well, what's the point of pushing if you're just going to take a break every now and then? But I think you need that. And I think it needs to be an intentional thing.
I agree with that. But then you come back, and this is where that's surrounding yourself and having people speak objectively to you so you can hear.
Yeah.
That's when you say, okay, let's say you end this month of November and let's say that you hit 30,000 words, not 50,000 words. Let's say that's where you end up November.
Right.
Is that really a loss? It may not have been the objective, but it's either, oh, I didn't hit 50,000 words, or gee, in November, I wrote 30,000 words and I'm that further along. I mean, we set these artificial goals, and it's not that those artificial goals don't matter and just forget about them. That's not the point. But there are times that you have to set some of those things aside. I had to set those types of things aside. Literally, my book, Meaningful Success, and some of these workbooks, they were ready to be printed well over a year ago.
Yeah.
And because of some of our discussions, some of that objective speaking to me as we talked through things, we decided that there were some things we wanted to do to expand upon it. So I had to set aside the timetable.
Yeah.
so that would be something. What about you? I mean, what is something that you might say is helpful when you're dealing with these discouragement? I mean, a simple one for me is sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes you literally just need sleep.
Yeah, that's very real. And that helps with the exhaustion, and that help when you're not feeling as exhausted, you're not straining against yourself. Yeah, I think honestly one of the biggest things is that intentionality with taking time away.
Yeah.
And it's an intentional thing on two fronts. One is taking the break in the first place.
Yes.
And the other is knowing when to stop taking a break.
Well, and I'll throw in a third one. Sometimes that break, in fact, this is something that I would say is almost a step in itself, is completely changing the scene.
Yeah.
So for example, I like to run or I like to go outside and exercise or walk or whatever.
Yeah.
It is weird. Sometimes I can remember I've walked outside because I've been heavy in work mode for a few weeks or whatever. And then I go out and I take a walk and it's like, wait a minute, there's a world outside. I mean,
yeah.
It's like you see sky
Yeah.
and you see trees and you feel wind and you look, and it's like, I know that sounds silly, but it's almost like you forget that there is a broader world because you get so hung up in the
whatever task you're on.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so part of that stepping out is also changing the scenery, getting out into a totally different frame of mind.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes when I'm not even really setting out to think about stuff, I'll find myself just in a different situation, having these things come to my mind that are solving problems or that are, like with the story I'm working on right now for NaNoWriMo, like I took a shower, I think it was yesterday. I took a shower and I wasn't even thinking about the story, but I just had this cascade of like 4 or 5 different things come to me out of nowhere that were like, oh yeah, I need to change this. I need to do that. That's a good idea. And it's sort of a different version of what you're talking about, because it's not like going on a walk or going out somewhere. It's, but it's weird how sometimes I need to not only have that different environment, even if that's as simple as the inside of the shower.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it needs to be, I wasn't setting out to figure out these things.
Well, that's where the creativity comes back into play.
And the subconscious. And,
yes.
Yeah.
It gives you space. It's almost like when you're working, sometimes it's like you're trying to shove everything all at once, trying to go through a doorway. It's kind of like you've got this bottleneck of ideas and you can't make any forward progress because everything's kind of rushing in. But when you take that step away and you're in that other environment, then you're not trying to think of 50 things around this one item.
Yeah.
You're doing something else, and then that one idea will come flow. So it's like it frees up the bottleneck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, today we really just wanted to chat a little bit about, some of the realities. I mean, when we're chasing success, when we're chasing our goals and our dreams, we are going to hit some frustrations. We're going to hit some of these obstacles, and you're not alone if you're feeling that way. I mean, we're dealing with that as well. And I'm sure that we'll have a lot of other ideas that come forward as we kind of talk through this in future episodes. But again, having that surround people around you who can speak objectively, giving you the permission to step away, consciously step away, getting some rest, changing the environment. All these are things that can be helpful. And I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas that you might share. In fact, we'd love to hear some of those ideas if you have some things. Yeah,
if you want to leave us a message, digital voicemail, you can do so at speakpipe.com/MSP. And if you are interested in discussing your own success journey on a possible future episode of the podcast as a guest, you can go to meaningfulsuccesspodcast.com and click on the guests link at the top to fill out that form. So, Father.
Yes.
What's your weekly favorite?
Oh, it's the weekly favorite.
Chocolate pie. I mean, it's just a simple, Jello pudding pie or something like that, but it was, with Dream Whip or something in there or whatever. And but it was good, and it was not so high calorie, and so I enjoyed it.
Nice. That's you were so quick on the draw.
I was so quick on the draw. Well, it's because I had the chocolate pie for lunch today.
Oh, that was your lunch?
Well, not just that for my lunch.
Yeah.
That was after my lunch, I should say.
Yeah.
What about you?
My weekly favorite, like I said, I think I said this earlier. I've been hanging out with friends a bit more than I had the chance to for a while.
That's great.
And so that's been really fun and really refreshing to be able to do that, because for quite a while I was just so busy.
Mm-hmm.
So
doing good.
Yeah. Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up for today.
Okie doke.
Do you have any last bits of wisdom for us?
Eat some chocolate pie.
What about people who are allergic to chocolate?
Well, apple pie is good too.
Okay, so you have been given your marching orders. Go get some chocolate pie or some apple pie. And until next time, key lime pie, banana cream pie.
I guess pie's on my mind.
Yeah. So until next week, make sure and get some pie. And I guess we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks. I love you, Father.
Love you too, Josiah.
Isn't that nice?
It's very nice.
Good. The Meaningful Success Podcast is myself, Josiah Clark, and my father, Wade Clark.
That's me.
That's him. The theme song is Brings Back the Feeling by Daniel Gunnarsson, licensed through Epidemic Sound. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/Meaningful Success Podcast. Please give us money and we will give you kisses.
Excuse me?
Digital kisses. Mwah, mwah, mwah. There you go. There's your digital kisses. Now I have fulfilled my duty.
Okay.
But now you have to fulfill your duty of giving me money. Give us money on the Meaningful Success Podcast Patreon so that you can see my face when I make kisses like this. Mwah, mwah, mwah.